Welcome to the history of the dressing gown. Before we begin, a brief note for your safety. Please do not listen to this wander through history while driving or operating machinery. Only listen when you're somewhere you can relax safely and completely. Tonight we drift into the comforting world of the dressing gown, a garment so familiar that it often slips through history unnoticed, yet one that has wrapped generations in warmth, privacy, and quiet ritual. As you settle in, imagine the soft weight of a dressing gown resting around your shoulders. The fabric falls gently, following the shape of your body without asking anything of you. Its warmth is subtle, its presence familiar, a small cocoon that signals the day is slowing down. A dressing gown is more than clothing. It's a threshold garment, worn in the spaces between waking and sleeping, between public life and private rest. It appears in those in-between times, early mornings when the kettle boils and the house is still, or late evenings when lights are low and the world outside has faded into darkness. In those moments, the dressing gown becomes a kind of soft boundary, gently separating you from the demands of the day. Its story stretches back through centuries of changing fabrics, shifting fashions, and evolving ideas about comfort and modesty. The dressing gown has been practical and luxurious, simple and ornate, a necessity in cold houses, and a pleasure in warm ones. It has appeared in paintings, novels, and films, often quietly, as if it knows its role is not to draw attention, but to support the person wearing it. As you listen, you might recall dressing gowns from your own life, one worn by a parent on winter mornings, or a favourite gown you reached for during illness or recovery. These memories are part of the dressing gown's history too, threads of personal experience woven into a much larger fabric of everyday life. Let your breathing soften as we begin tracing that story, moving back through time to the earliest moments when people first wrapped themselves in loose, flowing layers at the edges of the day. The dressing gown may feel modern, but its roots stretch far into the past, into a long human search for warmth, ease, and a gentle way to move toward rest. Long before the dressing gown had a name, people reached for loose, flowing layers at the quieter edges of the day. In ancient homes lit by oil lamps or small hearth fires, clothing for work and public life was structured, but at home, softness mattered more. The garments people chose in private were often simpler, less restrictive, and designed to allow the body to relax. In ancient Greece, the himation, a large rectangular piece of cloth, could be draped over the shoulders and wrapped around the body in soft folds. During the day, it might be worn in a more formal style, but at home, the same fabric could be arranged more loosely, allowing movement and comfort. You can imagine someone stepping away from the noise of the marketplace, drawing the himation closer and feeling the day's tension begin to ease. In Rome, tunics were the basic garment, but at home, people might choose versions made from softer fabrics, worn without belts or tight fastenings. After the duties of public life were done, a looser tunic or cloak could signal a shift into a more private, restful state. These garments weren't called dressing gowns, but they served a similar purpose. They marked the transition from outward-facing life to inward-facing quiet. Across colder regions, woolen cloaks offered warmth as night settled in. Picture a simple dwelling, the glow of embers fading, and a heavy woolen wrap pulled close around the shoulders. The fabric might be rough by modern standards, but to the person wearing it, it represented safety against the cold and a small pocket of comfort in a harsh environment. These early layers were practical, but they were also deeply human. They reflected a basic need that has never really changed, the desire to feel sheltered at the end of the day. Even without a specific name, these garments carried the spirit of what the dressing gown would later become, a companion for the quieter hours, a soft barrier between the body and the world. As we move forward through history, that desire for draped comfort will keep resurfacing, taking new shapes and new names, but always returning to the same simple idea, that there is value in clothing designed not for display, but for rest. As societies grew more complex, homes themselves became more structured. In medieval and early modern households, especially among the wealthier classes, private chambers began to play a larger role in daily life. These were spaces set apart from the public rooms of the house, places for dressing, sleeping, and quiet reflection. Clothing followed this division, and garments meant for these private spaces began to emerge. Loose robes made from linen or wool appeared in these chambers, often worn over nightclothes or simple undergarments. They were practical, offering warmth in houses where fires did not burn in every room, and modesty in environments where servants and family members might pass through. You can imagine a person standing beside a small bed, lifting a robe from a wooden peg, and feeling its familiar weight settle over their shoulders. The soundscape of these rooms was gentle. The soft crackle of a fire, the faint creak of floorboards, the whisper of fabric moving as someone prepared for sleep. The robe became part of this quiet ritual, a garment that signaled the end of the day's formalities. It allowed the wearer to move through their private space without feeling exposed, yet without the stiffness of daytime clothing. These robes were not yet called dressing gowns, but they marked an important step in that direction. They were garments with a specific purpose tied to time and place, worn in the hours before bed, in rooms meant for rest. They reflected a growing awareness that the transition between day and night deserved its own kind of clothing, something softer and more forgiving. In colder seasons, these robes might be lined or layered, their fabrics chosen to hold warmth close to the body. In warmer climates, lighter linens allowed air to move freely, offering comfort without heaviness. The materials varied, but the intention remained the same: to create a small, wearable refuge within the home. As you picture these scenes, you might notice how familiar they feel, despite the centuries that separate them from modern life. The act of reaching for a garment at the end of the day, of wrapping oneself in something that belongs to the private world rather than the public one, is a thread that runs quietly through history. It is along this thread that the dressing gown will eventually appear, carrying forward the same gentle purpose in a new form. By the 17th and 18th centuries, global trade was reshaping wardrobes across Europe. Ships carried silks from China, cottons from India, and richly patterned textiles from across Asia and the Middle East. These fabrics brought not only new textures and colours, but new ideas about how clothing could feel and flow around the body. Out of this exchange emerged garments that would directly influence the dressing gown. One of these was the banyan, a loose robe inspired by Eastern styles, worn by men in Europe as informal indoor dress. Unlike the structured coats and waistcoats of public life, the banyan was relaxed, with wide sleeves and flowing lines. It was often made from luxurious fabrics, printed cottons, embroidered silks, or soft brocades that felt pleasant against the skin. Imagine a scholar in the 1700s seated at a desk, quill poised above parchment, wrapped in a banyan. The room is quiet, lit by candles or the pale light of morning. The robe moves gently with each breath, allowing the wearer to sit, think, and write without the constraints of formal clothing. In portraits from this period, men are often shown in banyans, suggesting not laziness, but contemplation and intellect. The garment became associated with thoughtfulness and leisure. Women too had their own versions of informal robes and morning gowns, worn while dressing, reading, or moving through the private spaces of the home. These garments were not yet standardized, but they shared a common spirit. They were meant for the hours when one was not fully on display, but still awake and active. Slowly, the language around these garments began to shift. Terms like morning gown and dressing gown appeared, describing clothing worn during the rituals of getting ready or winding down. The dressing gown in particular came to mean a garment that bridged the gap between nightwear and daywear, a piece that could be worn over a nightshirt or chemise, or over informal clothing during the quieter moments of the day. As you picture these early dressing gowns, you might notice how they combine elements we've already seen: the draped comfort of ancient garments, the private chamber robes of medieval households, and the luxurious fabrics of global trade. The dressing gown was not invented in a single moment. It grew gradually, shaped by centuries of small decisions about how people wanted to feel in their own homes. In this period, the dressing gown began to take on a personality of its own, a garment that suggested ease, thoughtfulness, and a certain kind of domestic elegance. It was no longer just a practical layer. It was a quiet statement about how one chose to inhabit the private hours of the day. As the Victorian era unfolded, the dressing gown settled into everyday life with a quiet certainty. Homes of the period were often cool, with warmth concentrated around fireplaces, and the journey from bed to hearth could be brisk. The dressing gown became a trusted companion in these moments, offering both modesty and a gentle buffer against the chill. It was a garment that belonged to the private world, worn during the hours when the household was still waking or winding down. Picture a Victorian bedroom in the early morning. Heavy curtains keep out the cold air, and a faint glow from the fire casts soft shadows across patterned wallpaper. Beside the bed, a dressing gown hangs from a hook or rests over a chair, ready to be pulled on before the day truly begins. Women's gowns often featured quilted fabrics, delicate stitching, and subtle embellishments. They were practical, but they also reflected the Victorian love of detail and ornament. Men's gowns tended toward rich fabrics like velvet or thick wool, sometimes lined with silk for added warmth. The dressing gown became part of daily ritual. It was the garment one reached for after rising from bed or before retiring at night. It might be warmed by the fire and then placed around someone's shoulders with care, a small act of kindness in a world that could be strict and demanding. In this way, the dressing gown took on an emotional role, symbolizing not just warmth, but tenderness and domestic affection. In literature and art, the dressing gown appeared as a sign of intimacy and interior life. Characters in novels might be described in their gowns during moments of vulnerability or reflection, suggesting that the garment belonged to the private self rather than the public persona. It was a piece of clothing that allowed people to be more fully themselves, away from the expectations of society. As you imagine these Victorian scenes, you might notice how familiar they feel, even now. The act of wrapping oneself in a gown on a cool morning, of moving through the house in something soft and forgiving, is still part of many people's routines. The fabrics have changed, and the styles have evolved, but the underlying desire to feel sheltered and cared for at the edges of the day remains much the same. The Victorian dressing gown, with its blend of practicality and quiet elegance, helped shape the garment we know today, leaving behind a legacy of comfort woven into the fabric of everyday life. With the arrival of the 20th century, the world of textiles changed dramatically. New manufacturing methods made fabrics like cotton, flannel, toweling, and later synthetic fibres more widely available. The dressing gown adapted to these changes, becoming softer, lighter, and more accessible to people across different incomes and lifestyles. It shifted from being a symbol of domestic ritual to a more universal companion, worn by people in homes of every size and style. Imagine a mid-century bathroom, steam rising gently after a bath. A toweling dressing gown hangs nearby, ready to absorb water and provide warmth. The fabric is thick but pliable, wrapping around the body like a portable towel. For many, this kind of gown became a staple, something worn after bathing, during lazy weekend mornings, or on evenings when comfort mattered more than appearance. Its practicality made it a favourite, and its softness offered a sense of calm that lingered long after the bath was finished. Flannel gowns offered a different kind of comfort, their brushed surfaces gentle against the skin. Patterns like checks, stripes, or simple solids gave them a homely feel. In colder climates, these gowns were especially valued, turning chilly houses into spaces that felt more welcoming. Synthetic fabrics later introduced lighter, fleecier textures, creating gowns that were warm without being heavy. These new materials made dressing gowns easier to wash, quicker to dry, and more durable, allowing them to become everyday companions rather than special garments reserved for particular moments. As central heating became more common, the dressing gown's role shifted slightly. It was no longer always a necessity for warmth, but it remained important as a symbol of relaxation. People wore gowns while making tea, reading newspapers, watching television, or simply moving through their homes in a state that was neither fully dressed nor fully at rest. The gown became a uniform for downtime, a garment that signalled a gentle pause in the rhythm of the day. In popular culture, dressing gowns appeared on screen and in photographs, often associated with characters who were thoughtful, eccentric, or quietly at ease. From film stars in glamorous robes to ordinary people in simple cotton gowns, the garment continued to represent a softer, more personal side of life. It became a visual shorthand for comfort, signalling that the person wearing it was in a moment of ease rather than performance. As you picture these modern scenes, you might recognize elements from your own experience. a favourite gown that has seen years of use, its fabric worn but comforting, a guest gown kept for visitors, or a gown that becomes particularly important during illness or recovery, when the body needs both warmth and gentleness. The modern dressing gown, shaped by new fabrics and changing lifestyles, carried forward a very old tradition, one rooted in the simple desire to feel at home in one's own skin. Beyond its practical use, the dressing gown has become a powerful symbol of home, rest, and the intimate rhythms of daily life. It appears in memories with surprising clarity, often tied to specific people, places, and moments that feel safe and familiar. These memories form part of the dressing gown's quiet legacy, woven into the fabric of countless households across generations. You might recall a parent or grandparent in a particular gown, perhaps a patterned robe worn every morning, or a plain, well-loved gown that seemed to belong to them as much as their voice or their smile. These garments become part of how we remember those we've lived with, woven into scenes of breakfast tables, quiet evenings, and winter mornings. The dressing gown becomes a kind of visual shorthand for comfort, signalling warmth, familiarity, and the gentle routines that shape family life. The dressing gown also carries associations of care. It is often the garment someone wears when they are looking after another person, bringing tea, checking on a child, or sitting up late with someone who is unwell. In these moments, the gown becomes a kind of soft armour, allowing the wearer to stay warm and comfortable while offering support. Its presence in these memories gives it a quiet emotional weight, connecting it to moments of tenderness and compassion. In stories and films, dressing gowns are used to signal vulnerability, intimacy, or transition. A character in a gown is usually at home or in a place where they feel safe enough to let their guard down. The garment suggests that we are seeing them not as the world sees them, but as they are in their private life. This makes the dressing gown a powerful visual symbol for authenticity and emotional closeness, reinforcing its role as a companion in the quieter hours. For many people, a dressing gown is also tied to specific rituals, making the first cup of tea in the morning, stepping out to look at the weather, or settling down with a book at night. These small routines give structure to the day, and the gown becomes part of that structure, a familiar companion that signals, "This is a moment for you." It becomes a marker of personal time, a garment that gently separates the world's demands from the individual's need for rest. As you think about your own relationship with dressing gowns, you might notice how they appear at times when you are most yourself, sleepy, thoughtful, recovering, or simply resting. They are not garments for performance, but for presence, for being quietly where you are, without needing to be anything more. In this way, the dressing gown has become more than just a piece of clothing. It is a symbol of home, of the spaces where you can soften, and of the moments when life slows down enough for you to feel the gentle weight of fabric around your shoulders, and know that, for now, you are exactly where you need to be. As we drift toward the end of this gentle journey, the dressing gown stands before us not just as an object, but as a thread running through countless lives. From ancient draped garments to medieval robes, From silk banyans to quilted Victorian gowns, from toweling robes to modern fleece, the dressing gown has continually adapted while keeping its quiet purpose intact. It has followed people through changing homes, shifting fashions, and evolving routines, always returning to the same simple idea: comfort at the edges of the day. Imagine, once more, a dressing gown resting around your shoulders. The fabric is familiar, perhaps a little worn at the cuffs, perhaps newly soft and plush. It holds the warmth of your body, creating a small personal climate of comfort. The tie at your waist sits loosely, not to constrain, but simply to keep the gown in place as you move. This garment has seen you at your most unguarded, early in the morning when the world is still, late at night when thoughts begin to slow, and in those in-between moments when you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep. The history we've wandered through tonight is not just about fabric and fashion. It is about the human desire to create softness around ourselves, to mark the edges of the day with rituals that say, "You can rest now." The dressing gown is one of those rituals made visible, a wearable reminder that comfort matters, that privacy has value, and that the body deserves gentleness. It is a garment that has accompanied people through illness, recovery, celebration, and quiet reflection, offering warmth without demand and presence without pressure. As you lie here, listening, you might picture your own dressing gown, or imagine one if you don't have one. A colour you like, a texture that feels right, a weight that settles around you in just the way you need. Let that image become part of the calm you're moving into. The dressing gown story continues every time someone reaches for it, wraps it around themselves, and steps into a quieter moment. In that sense, you are part of its history too, carrying forward a long tradition of seeking warmth and ease at the edges of the day. Let that thought rest with you now. Let the softness of this history settle around your mind the way a gown settles around the body. And as you drift towards sleep, you can leave the details of fabric and time behind, knowing only that somewhere in the background of your life, a simple garment has been quietly keeping you company. The dressing gown has found its way into popular culture in ways that reveal its quiet significance. On screen, in literature, and in art, it often appears during moments of vulnerability, contemplation, or gentle humour. Its presence signals that a character is at home, at ease, or in a state of transition. It is a garment that invites the viewer to see someone as they truly are, without the armour of public clothing. In classic cinema, dressing gowns became iconic. Think of characters who wander through grand houses in flowing robes, pausing by windows or fireplaces as they reflect on their lives. These gowns often symbolize luxury, but they also conveyed a sense of emotional openness. The viewer is invited into a private moment, one that feels softer and more human than the scenes that take place outside the home. In comedy, dressing gowns have been used to highlight the ordinary, the relatable, and the slightly chaotic. A character answering the door in a rumpled gown or rushing through the house in one becomes instantly familiar. The gown signals that they are caught in a moment of real life rather than performance. It is a garment that bridges the gap between the character and the audience, reminding us that everyone has their own quiet routines. Literature uses dressing gowns in similar ways. Authors often describe characters in their gowns during moments of introspection or emotional honesty. A dressing gown might appear in a scene where someone reads a letter, contemplates a decision, or sits quietly with their thoughts. The garment becomes a symbol of the inner world, a reminder that beneath the layers of public identity lies a softer, more private self. In modern media, dressing gowns continue to appear as markers of comfort and authenticity. They are worn by characters during morning rituals, late-night conversations, or moments of rest. Whether glamorous or simple, the gown signals that the person wearing it is in a space where they can be themselves. It is a garment that carries emotional weight without drawing attention to itself. As you think about these cultural moments, you might notice how the dressing gown symbolism aligns with your own experience. It represents the quieter parts of life, the moments when you are not performing, not rushing, not meeting expectations. It is a garment that belongs to the private world, a world that is often more meaningful than the one outside. In popular culture, as in everyday life, the dressing gown remains a gentle reminder of the value of rest and authenticity. Although the modern dressing gown has a distinctly Western history, garments with similar purposes exist across cultures. These robes, wraps, and layers share a common intention: to provide comfort, modesty, and ease during the quieter hours of the day. Exploring these garments reveals how universal the desire for softness and privacy truly is. In Japan, the yukata and kimono serve roles similar to dressing gowns, especially in domestic settings. The yukata, made from lightweight cotton, is worn after bathing or during warm weather. Its simple lines and gentle drape create a sense of calm, making it a favourite in traditional inns and homes. The kimono, more formal but still rooted in comfort, has long been associated with ritual and reflection. Both garments emphasize the importance of ease and presence, aligning closely with the spirit of the dressing gown. In China, the changshan and hanfu have historically been worn in private and public settings alike. Their flowing lines and layered fabrics create a sense of gentle movement, allowing the wearer to feel both comfortable and dignified. These garments, like the dressing gown, reflect a cultural appreciation for clothing that supports the body rather than constrains it. In South Asia, loose garments such as the kurta and chadar have long been used for comfort and modesty. These pieces, often made from soft cottons or lightweight silks, are worn during moments of rest or informal activity. Their gentle drape and breathable fabrics make them ideal for warm climates, offering a sense of ease that mirrors the dressing gown's purpose. Across the Middle East, robes like the abaya and dishdasha serve both practical and cultural roles. While often worn outside the home, they also provide comfort during private moments. Their flowing shapes and soft fabrics create a sense of calm, allowing the wearer to move through their environment with ease. In Western countries, the dressing gown evolved alongside these global garments, influenced by trade, travel, and cultural exchange. The banyan, for example, was directly inspired by Asian robes, bringing new shapes and fabrics into European homes. This exchange enriched the dressing gown's history, weaving global threads into its design. As you reflect on these garments, you might notice how similar they feel despite their cultural differences. Each one offers warmth, modesty, and a gentle transition between the public and private worlds. They remind us that the desire for comfort is universal, and that clothing can be a quiet companion in the moments when life slows down. The dressing gown, in its many forms, continues to connect people across cultures through the shared experience of rest. The dressing gown often becomes part of personal rituals, woven into the rhythms of daily life in ways that feel almost ceremonial. These rituals give shape to the day, marking transitions between waking and sleeping, activity and rest. The gown becomes a symbol of these transitions, a garment that signals a shift into a quieter, more reflective state. Morning rituals often begin with the dressing gown. The act of slipping into its soft folds can feel like a gentle awakening, a way of easing into the day without rushing. The gown might accompany someone as they make their first cup of tea, step outside to check the weather, or sit quietly before the demands of the day begin. In these moments, the gown becomes a companion, offering warmth and familiarity as the mind prepares to engage with the world. Evening rituals carry a similar sense of calm. Putting on a dressing gown after a long day can feel like shedding the weight of responsibilities. The fabric settles around the body, creating a sense of enclosure and safety. It might be worn while reading, watching television, or simply sitting in silence. The gown becomes a signal that the day is ending, that it is time to slow down and let thoughts soften. For many people, the dressing gown also plays a role in moments of vulnerability. During illness or recovery, the gown becomes a source of comfort, offering warmth without pressure. Its softness can be soothing, providing a sense of care when the body feels fragile. In these moments, the gown becomes more than clothing. It becomes a symbol of gentleness and support. The dressing gown often appears in memories tied to significant life events. It might be remembered from childhood mornings, from times spent with loved ones, or from quiet moments of reflection. These memories give the gown emotional weight, connecting it to experiences that shape the individual's sense of home and comfort. As you think about your own rituals, you might notice how the dressing gown fits into them. It is a garment that supports the body and mind during transitions, offering a sense of continuity and calm. It becomes part of the landscape of daily life, a familiar presence that accompanies moments of rest and reflection. In this way, the dressing gown becomes a symbol of the gentle rituals that help us navigate the day, offering comfort and stability in a world that often feels fast and demanding. As we reach the final chapter of this quiet journey, the dressing gown stands before us as a garment that has accompanied people through centuries of change. It has adapted to new fabrics, new homes, and new ways of living, yet its purpose has remained remarkably consistent. It offers comfort, modesty, and ease during the moments when life slows down, when the world outside can be held at a gentle distance. The dressing gown has followed people through history, appearing in ancient homes, medieval chambers, Victorian bedrooms, and modern living rooms. It has been worn by scholars deep in thought, parents moving softly through the house, and countless others who sought a moment of calm. Its presence in these spaces reflects a universal desire for softness and privacy, a need that transcends time and culture. You might picture the many forms it has taken: the draped fabrics of early garments, the private chamber robes of the medieval world, the silk banyans of the 18th century, the quilted gowns of the Victorians, and the toweling and fleece robes of the modern age. Each version carries the same quiet intention: to create a small, wearable refuge at the edges of the day. The details change, but the feeling remains familiar. In your own life, the dressing gown may have appeared at important moments: early mornings when the house was still, evenings when you needed to unwind, days of illness when warmth and gentleness mattered more than anything else. It may have been part of family memories, tied to the presence of people you loved. These experiences are part of the dressing gown's history too, woven into its long journey through time. As you lie here now, listening to the end of this story, you might imagine a dressing gown resting around your shoulders, whatever colour, fabric, or weight feels right to you. Let it become a symbol of the comfort you can offer yourself, a reminder that you are allowed to slow down, to soften, and to rest. The dressing gown's history is, in many ways, a history of that permission. The garment will continue its quiet work long after this episode ends, wrapping itself around new mornings and new evenings, accompanying new lives through their own gentle rituals. In that sense, the dressing gown is both ordinary and extraordinary, simple in form, but rich in meaning. If you'd like more bedtime histories like this, then please subscribe now. And if there's a topic you'd love to hear as you drift off, let me know in the comments. Sleep well and be safe.